This video is for you if you've ever made an extra mortgage payment and felt proud, and then wondered if you should have invested that money instead. It's for you if you're carrying low-interest debt and losing sleep over it. And it's for you if someone told you all debt is bad, and some part of you wasn't sure that was right. What we're going to cover: the actual math behind early debt payoff versus investing, the specific types of debt that are worth eliminating fast versus the ones worth keeping, a real example that walks through the numbers, and the framework you can use to make this decision for your own situation. This matters right now because interest rates have changed the calculus. What was true in 2012 is not automatically true in 2025. You need to run your own numbers, and I'm going to show you how. Chapter 1. What does debt-free actually cost you? Let's start with the basic math because this is where most people's intuition breaks down. When you make an extra payment on a debt, you are earning a guaranteed return equal to the interest rate on that debt. Pay down a 4% mortgage early. You just earned 4% guaranteed on that dollar. That's real. That's not nothing. But here's the question you have to ask. What else could that dollar have done? The S&P 500 has returned an average of roughly 10% annually over the long run, before inflation, before taxes. But 10% is the number most long-term investors work with as a baseline. So if your debt cost you 4% and the market has historically returned 10%, you have a 6-point spread. Every dollar you send to your lender instead of your brokerage account is a dollar that's working at 4% instead of potentially working at 10%. Over 20 years, on a single $10,000 decision, that spread is the difference between $21,900 and $67,200. That's not a rounding error. That's a $45,000 gap from one decision. Now, I want to be careful here because the market is not guaranteed and your debt payoff is. So this is a risk trade-off, not a free lunch. But if you're treating all debt as something to be eliminated as fast as possible regardless of the interest rate, you're leaving that math on the table without even looking at it. The average 30-year mortgage issued in 2020 and 2021 carried an interest rate below 3.5%. If you have one of those, you are holding one of the cheapest forms of leverage that has ever existed in modern American personal finance. Paying it off early is, in many cases, a financially irrational move, and yet it feels responsible, so people do it anyway. Chapter 2. The interest rate threshold: when to pay off, when to invest. So how do you know which debt to eliminate and which to carry? There's a framework I use called the threshold test. It's simple, and it's not perfect, but it will get you to the right answer 80% of the time. Step 1. List every debt you have with its interest rate. Step 2. Compare each rate against your expected long-term investment return. Most people use 7 to 10%. If you want to be conservative, use 7. If you want to use historical average, use 10. Pick your number and be consistent. Step 3. Any debt above that threshold is a priority payoff. Any debt below that threshold is worth reconsidering. Here's how that plays out in practice. Credit card debt at 22%? Pay it off. No investment in the world reliably beats 22% guaranteed. This is not a debate. The answer is always pay the credit card. Car loan at 8%? This is in the gray zone. Depends on your risk tolerance, your timeline, your tax situation. Student loan at 5%? Below the threshold for most investors. You might carry this and invest the difference. Mortgage at 3.5%? Well below threshold. In many scenarios, especially if you have years of investing runway ahead of you, paying this off early is the least optimal use of that cash. The point is not that debt is fine. The point is that interest rates exist on a spectrum, and your strategy should reflect that spectrum, not a blanket rule that treats a 3% mortgage the same as a 24% credit card. High-income earners who aggressively paid down low-interest debt in their 30s and 40s instead of maxing tax-advantaged accounts don't just miss investment returns. They miss compound growth in accounts that reduce their taxable income. It's a double loss: less money working and more money going to taxes. Chapter 3. The psychological pull of zero. Why this myth survives. Here's the honest part of this conversation, because I don't want to be glib about why people chase debt-free status. The feeling of owing nothing is genuinely valuable. There is a stress response, a real physiological one, that comes with carrying debt. People sleep better when that balance is zero. And sleep and stress have real effects on your productivity, your relationships, your decision-making. That is not fake. You should factor it in. But here's what I want you to notice. The financial advice industry, and especially the loudest voices in personal finance media, has conflated debt-free feels good with debt-free is always the optimal financial strategy. Those are two completely different claims, and running them together has cost a lot of people a lot of money. There's a reason this myth is so durable. Debt carries moral language in American culture. We talk about being in the hole, underwater, buried. We talk about debt as something we owe in a way that implies obligation and shame. When you pay it off, there's a ceremony to it, the mortgage burning party, the social media post. There's no ceremony for maxing your Roth IRA for the 15th consecutive year, even though that second act might do more for your retirement than the first. The debt-free myth also survives because for a certain cohort, it was actually the right answer. If you grew up in the 1970s and 80s when interest rates were routinely above 10%, then yes, paying off debt was almost certainly the right move. That wisdom got passed down across generations, and it wasn't wrong for the conditions that produced it. It's just not 1982 anymore. A 2023 Federal Reserve survey found that roughly 35% of Americans who describe themselves as financially comfortable carry mortgage debt they could theoretically pay off sooner. A meaningful portion of them are not doing so for exactly the reasons we've talked about. They've run the math and decided the spread between their rate and expected market returns is worth maintaining the debt. Chapter 4. How to build your own decision framework. Let's make this practical because a concept without a next step is just entertainment. Here is the 4-part decision framework. Step 1. Triage your debt by rate. Under 4%, almost certainly carry it and invest. 4 to 7%, this is judgment territory. Depends on your risk tolerance, your age, your tax bracket. Above 7%, this is your priority. Eliminate before aggressively investing in taxable accounts. Above 15%, drop everything and pay this off. Nothing else matters until it's gone. Step 2. Max your tax-advantaged accounts first, before any extra debt payments. Your 401k up to the employer match, your HSA if you have one, your Roth IRA if you're eligible. These buckets are irreversible. You cannot go back and contribute to a 2024 Roth IRA in 2027. Extra mortgage payments can always happen later. The Roth window closes. Step 3. Calculate the opportunity cost in real dollars. Take whatever you're planning to send as an extra payment. Model it in a compound interest calculator over your timeline. Compare the result against what your debt costs you. The number you're looking at is the actual cost of the decision, not a vague sense that debt is bad. Step 4. Factor in your actual psychology, not your ideal psychology. If you genuinely sleep better with zero debt and that translates into better work, better decisions, and a higher income, that is a real return that does not show up in a compound interest calculator. Weight it honestly. Just don't use it as a shortcut that lets you avoid doing the math. The people who navigate this well are not the ones who follow a rule. They're the ones who understand the principle behind the rule well enough to know when to break it. Let's land this. 1. Debt is not one thing. A 3% mortgage and a 22% credit card are not the same problem and do not deserve the same solution. 2. Every dollar you send to a low-interest lender has an opportunity cost. That cost is real, it compounds, and over a 20 to 30-year window, it gets large. 3. Max your tax-advantaged accounts before making extra debt payments on anything below 7%. The window on those accounts is finite. The option to pay down debt later is not. 4. Your psychology is a legitimate variable, but it is an input to the decision, not a substitute for the math. Debt-free can absolutely be the right goal. But right depends on the interest rate, the timeline, and what you'd actually do with the money instead. Run the numbers. Make a real decision. Don't let a feeling do the work of a strategy. If this reframed how you think about debt, subscribe. We cover this kind of math every week in plain language. And if you want the full framework in one place, I put together an investing order of operations guide that walks you through exactly which financial moves to make, in which order, based on your situation. Link is in the description. Share this with someone who still believes this. You might save them money.